welcome back, everyone. Some big updates. If you're living in California and, well, like in some other parts of the world right now, and you just have doubts about the virus, you don't believe the prevailing narratives, or you have doubts about the vaccines and you disagree with some of the medical statements being made public by your government, well, you just might be guilty of thought crime under what they're calling medical dissent. This is real in California. I'm going to be talking about what medical dissent is. If you're a Californian, I think mainly doctors and so on. Apparently now you got to be careful because, again, you got to walk the fine line of thought crime now. It's interesting seeing this get passed in California because you have similar things in Australia, similar things in other parts of the world that have already been done, where if you're a medical professional, it's like you can't question the narrative anymore. And it raises some questions, I think, about, well, what is medicine at this point? What is science at this point if you can't even question the prevailing narratives? A lot of people would argue that Isaac Newton and some of the birth of Western science was based around the idea that you should be able to question prevailing narratives. And folks, this is like going back to medieval times in terms of how you're able to look at what people commonly believe on this wild stuff. I'll be talking about this also. Guess who got the virus? Dr. Anthony Fauci, the same guy who told you that if you get vaccinated, that you have 100% immunity, you're never going to get sick from the virus, from COVID-19. You're totally safe. He gets sick. What does he do? He takes some of the approved treatments for the virus, not ivermectin, I should note, other ones the ones that he says you can take. And what happens? Actually, it makes his symptoms worse. And so Fauci, we're not sure his condition right now, but it seems that he's acknowledged that, hey, that stuff they wanted to give you, that snake oil, doesn't seem to be doing what they said it would do. Although they do claim that what he's suffering right now is a rare condition, right? Also, something interesting is happening right now. We've been talking for a while about economic downturn, the, say, coming collapse of some of the economy possibly. But there's something interesting taking place, which is that it's more like a woke collapse. And we're seeing now Facebook, Netflix, Disney, a lot of companies that have taken, really pretty far left stances in pretty much everything they do, are not doing so well all of a sudden. And based on what we're seeing in terms of which companies are doing well and which ones are not, it does seem to be the case that political stance of some of these companies is the cause of some of it. So I think what we're seeing right now is a woke collapse. We'll be talking about this, folks. That said, let's jump into the first stories for the day. And folks, as always, great having you all here. If you're on YouTube, Rumble, be sure to jump over to Epic TV about 25 minutes in. We will be jumping exclusively over there, so if you don't have an account yet, go in the description below the video, get your free trial. We're giving you a 14-day free trial. And folks, that said, let's get started now. So let me start by talking about this whole woke collapse and what is happening with this. Let me show you first what's happening on Twitter. This is a Rasmussen poll. And it says here on Disney, update. Folks, that downward slide right there, that's Disney's business just going underground. Update, Disney management hard at work, vaporizes half of company value. So there's the joke or half joking phrase of go woke, get broke, and Disney went woke. They agreed that they would start in terms of the sexuality, and it's kids content. A lot of the reasons why people watch Disney movies or are into Disney is because it's family friendly content. It's stuff you can show your kid or leave your kid with, and generally you're not too concerned. They're going to be watching like things you don't want them to be watching, like sexual content. Disney comes out and pretty much, well, they say directly on a private chat, they got leaked, that they're going to start pushing a sexual agenda with all of their films. And guess what? Parents didn't like that, as you could assume. And what happens? Well, what happens is that sliding scale I just showed you, and headlines like this, Disney management hard at work, vaporizes half of company value. They lost half their company value following that. Now, this is a quote here from on Rasmussen. It says, "No one goes to the movies to be made uncomfortable, and parents don't take their kids to the movies, and especially a Disney movie, to expose them to human sexuality before they are ready." And we can watch some of this happen with the recent film Lightyear, about Buzz Lightyear, the spaceman toy from Toy Story. I'm sure everyone knows him. Now, they point to this story from Breitbart. It says, "Nolt, Disney's woke Lightyear bombed all over the world." And it's interesting to watch that Disney really hedged their bets with Lightyear. This was set to be like, one of their major films for the season. This was, of course, Toy Story tends to do pretty well in general. But this was set to be one of their major films. What happens? They come out announcing, a lot of the marketing for the film was about a homosexual kissing scene. And really, I think the narrative of the fact the film had a homosexual kissing scene overshadowed anything else about the movie. And so the question for parents is, do you want to take your kids to go see homosexual kissing scenes? Essentially, in terms of marketing, that was the basis of the marketing. And a lot of parents, frankly, ended up basically saying no. Not only that, but while it was allowed in the U.S., a lot of other countries, including a lot of Arab countries, China, a lot of them banned the movie. So Disney didn't do well domestically, and they did not do well internationally. They did much worse internationally, in fact. Now, the important thing with this is a trend we're seeing right now across the spectrum of many businesses. It's not just Disney feeling the heat on this, so to speak. We also saw the same thing happen with a lot of other companies, Netflix being another big one. Let me show you this. This is from The Verge on June 23rd, just recently. Netflix cuts around 300 jobs after losing subscribers. It says Netflix is cutting around 300 jobs today as part of a second round of layoffs. The company previously laid off around 150 employees and dozens of contractors in May. The layoffs may impact many different teams, and mostly workers in the U.S., though international roles are being cut as well. Netflix spokesperson Bao Nguyen said in a statement to The Verge. Variety first reported on the job cuts, and they're saying it's the latest round of job cuts after Netflix's rough quarter one earnings report, where it announced the revenue growth was slowing and that it lost subscribers for the first time in over a decade. Now, a lot of people would look at this and say, well, isn't the economy just doing kind of rough in general? Well, yes and no. I mean, typically when the economy's rough, you tend to see entertainment kind of stay afloat. Even during, funny enough, even during the Dust Bowl and, during the Great Depression in the 1930s in the United States, you actually saw Hollywood do pretty dang well. And the reason is when people are not doing well, if they're facing a lot of hardships, they tend to still want to feel happy. And of course, movies tended to be one way that people kind of escaped from the hardships they were facing. This is again why in times of really rough economic downturn, Hollywood and movies tended to do pretty well, regardless of that. We saw the same thing in the early days of COVID, where people were locked in their homes. you couldn't leave for a while. And what happened? A lot of people were going to streaming services. There was a boom in them all of a sudden. Now we're watching the bust in them because, these companies took pretty hard stances politically. Now, is it just, now again, you can look at the idea of, is it really because, the political stances? We can look at some other examples of it. One of the great examples is Daily Wire Plus, which is Daily Wire, I guess technically one of our competitors, but, whatever, right? The more the merrier in terms of people who have good values, in my opinion. They started their own video streaming service, and very shortly afterwards, Daily Wire now has 890,000 subscribers. They just brought on Jordan Peterson, and they're putting, I think, $100 million into kids' content. People are not leaving streaming services. People are not leaving video on demand. People are leaving Netflix, and they're leaving Disney Plus. That's what they're leaving. They're going to PureFlix, maybe Epic TV, Daily Wire Plus, and then Trump's actually starting his own too through his. Remember they're doing a whole technology company, Trump Technology, social media, Truth Social is the first of those. They're also doing video on demand next, and they're also doing a news service after that. And so you're watching this shift politically, and part of that political shift is also taking place in the business realm. Let me show you another piece on this, just on the Disney part. This is the Daily Beast on April 20th. It says, Elon Musk attacks Netflix over subscriber loss, says woke mind virus is making Netflix unwatchable. And remember, Netflix did a lot of weird things, like Cuties, which a lot of people accused of them basically promoting pedophilia. Netflix began working with the Obamas for a while. And after they started working with the Obamas, they started having weird pedophile-ish content, and people got really unhappy about that. I believe they now dropped the Obamas, and seems they've kept some of the political stances. But regardless of that, it says this. This is Daily Beast. It says Netflix's disappointing earnings report caused its stock price to tumble about 23%. This is in April. And one person who appeared to celebrate the news was Tesla's CEO, Elon Musk, the world's richest man with a net worth of over $260 billion. Responding to a report about Netflix's disappointing numbers, Musk tweeted late Tuesday night, quote, "The woke mind virus is making Netflix unwatchable." When a user responded to Musk that the woke mind virus is the biggest threat to the civilization, Musk agreed, replying, yes. Very, very, very Musk response. When a user responded to Musk that the woke mind virus is the biggest threat to civilization, Musk agreed yes again, and he replied true, adding, can they please just make sci-fi/fantasy at least mostly about sci-fi/fantasy? There's more to it than this. I'll show you in just a minute. First, though, folks, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by American Hartford Gold. Inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. Interest rates are skyrocketing, and a recession now looms ahead of us. Caught between runaway inflation and a recession, our retirement accounts are in real danger. But if you want to protect your future, you can really protect your future from this recession that's already upon us. You can call American Hartford Gold, and they can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver, which tends to be decently stable. All it takes to get started is a short phone call, and they'll have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or into your IRA or 401k. And they make it easy to do that as well. They're the highest rated firm in the country with an A+ rating from the BBB and thousands of satisfied clients. If you call them right now, they'll give you up to $2,500 of free silver in your first qualifying order, and they're also giving a free safe. You can see here. Now, folks, don't wait. Call them now. That's 877-260-2764. That's 877-260-2764, or you can text Joshua to 65532. And big thanks out to American Hartford Gold for sponsoring today's episode. Now, on this whole picture we're looking at, it isn't just entertainment, I should note. We are facing really an economic downturn overall. And some of this is impacting, again, a lot of the more leftist businesses, it seems, pretty heavily. Maybe because, well, some of the biggest corporations just happen to be of that nature. It's interesting now that Facebook is suffering what they're calling one of the worst downturns in recent history. And I'm sure many of you have had experiences of Facebook that would kind of tell you why. Because when I hear this, I think, well, yeah, of course, Facebook became basically useless, essentially. Facebook used to be the place where you connected with your friends and you told people what you were up to and you posted photos of yourself. And, the government could monitor it and decide whether or not they want to monitor you or not based on your comments. Right? Half joking. Anyways, Facebook used to be a place where you could connect with people. It used to be a place where you could share your ideas and have discussions. And you could make groups and you can organize. And Facebook then began restricting a lot of that. They made it so that your posts might be shadow banned from your friends and family members. They made it so if you start a group on Facebook and they don't like what you're doing politically, they can shut down your group. You had like moms groups getting shut down. Parent groups getting shut down, political groups getting shut down, and it just so happened almost all of them that were being shut down happened to be on the right side of the political spectrum. Go figure. Which made a lot of people, of course, just stop using the platform, as you would expect. Now, Zuckerberg is saying that basically they're not doing so hot. Zero Hedge is reporting that 1 month ago we showed that while BLS is still reveals its seasonally adjusted statistical nonsense to divine the monthly levels of payrolls, talking about several companies, not just Facebook, the real world is seeing a wave of mass layoffs, the likes of which have not been seen since the COVID crash. Fast forward to today, when it appears we're about to hit the mother lode of mass layoffs after none other than Mark Zuckerberg, head of Facebook, or Meta as they call it now, sounded the alarm. According to Reuters, Facebook owner Meta Platforms, which will likely be undoing the name change just as Bitcoin bottoms, has cut plans to hire engineers by at least 30% this year. CEO Mark Zuckerberg told employees on Thursday as he warned them to brace for deep economic downturn. This is a quote from Zuckerberg. "If I had to bet, I'd say this might be one of the worst downturns that we've seen in recent history." That was him telling employees that during a Q&A session. Zuckerberg confirmed the layoffs are also coming, saying the company was turning up the heat on performance management to weed out staffers unable to meet the more aggressive goals. I assume it's a bit like Hunger Games over at Facebook Labs, where employees need to demonstrate their adherence to company workload policies or risk being weeded out, as Zuckerberg, quote, turns up the heat on them, right? Now, a bit more on this. Again, we're seeing kind of a seismic shift in the broader economy. Another interesting thing, too, is this is shaking up the housing markets as well. Zero Hedge is reporting this also, that JP Morgan is firing hundreds of mortgage bankers as the housing market breaks. To be expected. We talked about the housing market before. And at the same time, too, President Joe Biden seems to be, trying to pretend there's nothing wrong with the economy right now. And even very far left media are fact-checking him, saying, actually, Mr. Biden, the economy is not doing so hot. Let me show you this, folks. This is CNN actually calling out Joe Biden. Fact-checking Joe Biden said, fact-check, Biden falsely claims U.S. has fastest growing economy in the world. Now, of course, they're CNN, and so they don't throw him under the bus totally. They just challenge his idea on whether America is, in fact, the fastest growing economy in the world, which it is not. But, of course, they do defend some of his narratives in it. Politico, though, has something cutting a little deeper than CNN on this. And Politico is pretty far left also. And they're saying that Biden is straining for a message on the economy as it's basically falling apart, which is accurate. It says this, quote, America still has a choice to make, this is Biden talking. America still has a choice to make, a choice between a government by the few, for the few, he's saying, or a government for all of us, a democracy for all of us, an economy where all of us have a fair shot, maybe a fair shot at failure. The problem with what they're talking about creating equality typically is not equality in success. Typically what they mean is equality in equal failure, because it's very hard to help people succeed. But it's very easy to tear down people who do succeed and make them equal to those who don't. And it seems to be based on the economic trajectory. That second path is the one that Biden's administration is trying to make. Tearing people down and putting people in kind of equal misery, while at the same time launching all kinds of social programs to turn people against each other. But Politico is calling them out, and they say, but with the midterms rapidly approaching, voters' patience appears to be likely running out, and the president and party in power stand poised to pay the political price. They're saying the political environment is brutal for Democrats. This is a former senior advisor to Barack Obama. The political environment is brutal for Democrats. There are a few more economic issues more politically painful than high food and high gas prices, and we are heading into high-stakes midterms. Recognizing that reality trumps messaging, and there is no silver bullet message that makes people feel better about a tough economic situation. The best thing the White House can do right now is show voters that they are trying. And as they're noting, Biden is not trying to show voters they're trying to fix things. Biden is basically saying, it's great. Look how great we are. We're better than the other countries. You should be grateful that I'm currently in the White House and that, Trump's not here or something like that. That's essentially their message. They're not trying to fix the gas prices. They're not trying to fix the economy. In fact, the packages and programs they have are probably going to make it worse. And they're not trying to hide it to some extent anymore. Now, I'm going to jump over to Epic TV in a minute, but first I'm going to talk about Dr. Fauci. Because, folks, Dr. Fauci caught the virus. This is the same guy who told you you have a 100% protection from the virus if you get vaccinated. Remember that? 100% protection. Great. Who wouldn't want to get it? Well, turns out you don't. You do have a much higher chance of of infection afterwards because of some of the unfortunate side effects that we're only now starting to see with this. But then this is also the guy who is restricting some of the treatments, like ivermectin, like other things, like more Biden, but monoclonal antibody treatment. They banned that in a lot of areas, made it very difficult to get. Well, what happened? Dr. Fauci gets the virus, the one that he said you couldn't get if you were vaccinated. And then what happens? He tries out some of the treatment regimens that he himself was recommending. And what happens? His condition got much worse afterwards. And it's interesting they're actually talking about it. ABC News says this: Fauci says he's taking second course of Paxlovid after experiencing rebound with the antiviral treatment. It says after testing positive for COVID-19 earlier this month, Dr. Anthony Fauci said Tuesday he has joined a growing group of people experiencing a Paxlovid rebound. Go figure. Following treatment with Pfizer's antiviral. And Fauci, who is 81 years old, said that when he first tested positive 2 weeks ago, when this was out, of course, he had very minimal symptoms. He didn't have the virus very badly when he first tested for it. However, when he began to feel worse, they say given his age, he was prescribed Paxlovid. Other than fatigue and a bit of congestion, Fauci reported that he felt really quite well. And after his 5-day course of Paxlovid, he tested negative with a rapid test. However, after testing negative for 3 consecutive days, Fauci said he decided to take one more test out of precaution and subsequently found himself positive again on the 4th day. And he said this, he said it was sort of what people are referring to as Paxlovid rebound. He said that during an interview with Foreign Policy Global Health Forum on Tuesday. And over the course of the next day, he began to feel, quote, really poorly and, quote, much more worse than in the first go-around. Now, we don't know what Fauci's condition is currently, but it seems to be the case that him taking Paxlovid not only didn't work because he wasn't that bad. He recovered from it and then tested positive again afterwards, and then his condition began deteriorating. I don't know the updates on this just yet. We'll have to see. But on this note, Dr. Peter McCullough had some takes on what Fauci is going through, and he said this on Twitter. He said Paxlovid tested in 45-year-old uninjecteds, so use and failed. In other words, they were testing in people who didn't have the vaccine. So use in failed quad elderly is not following science. He's suggesting that people who have already had the vaccines and the booster shots and who are elderly are not representative of the people who might benefit from using Paxlovid, because Paxlovid, the testing of it, was on people who were around 45 years old, middle-aged, and who did not have the vaccine. Fauci, being someone who's not 45 years old nor unvaccinated, we assume at least, would not be in that category. And so really on false science, he placed his faith in this treatment that he himself was recommending. Now, Peter McCullough notes at this point he needs a community standard of care multi-drug regimen over a prolonged period, which has helped so many seniors get over their illness into recovery. And we'll see whether Fauci is willing to do that, frankly. Now, that said, I want to go into some of the experimental issues with the Pfizer vaccine that are happening right now. I also want to go into medical dissent and some of the new laws on this in California, which really mimic what we saw previously in Australia, and raises some concerns in my book because, well, we saw some of the harshest virus policies in the world outside of mainland China being practiced in Australia, in particular around Darwin, Australia, where, ironically, they've implemented the Chinese Communist Party's social credit system. In fact, they did it openly prior to the virus. Now, Australia was touted as kind of the global example of what the Western world should be doing to deal with the virus. And now we see California following suit with some of that, where if you're a medical doctor or you work in medicine, you're not allowed to question medical narratives, raising again questions over, well, how do we even define science at this point, folks? All right, that said, let's jump over to Epic TV. I want to talk about the virus stuff we can't talk about on YouTube because previously they deleted our videos and given us strikes for doing it. Join us on Epic TV where we can speak freely. And folks, before we jump over, let me show you a quick trailer. Interesting video here. Voicemail is revealing that Joe Biden was worried about the fallout of Hunter Biden's business dealings with CCP princeling Yi Jianming. Biden is implicated in this. Let me show you this trailer, then we'll jump over.
That was Joe Biden leaving a message for his son Hunter on December 12, 2018, right after the New York Times published a story about Hunter's business partner, Ye Jianming, a princeling of China's elite with rumored ties to the People's Liberation Army. Biden was relieved that the New York Times expose turned out to be more of a puff piece. And he had every reason to be relieved. Ye Jianming was the chairman of Chinese conglomerate China Energy, CEFC, which at one point was one of the largest companies in all of China. Ye was also Hunter's patron, with millions of dollars of CEFC money going straight into Hunter's bank account, as well as that of Joe Biden's brother, James Biden. In March of 2018, Ye was arrested in China for so-called economic crimes. He has not been seen since then.
Yeah, folks, that's our show, Truth Over News. If you haven't checked it out yet, they do some really good investigations. Again, that's only on Epic TV. Jump over now, and folks, we'll see you there. All right, so let's talk about, well, first of all, actually, on Ye Jianming. You know, they mentioned that New York Times wrote, basically did an expose on Hunter Biden,